If there is a district synonymous with crime and destitution in Victorian London's East End, its name is no doubt Whitechapel, which carries the most infamous reputation in novels and movies. Certainly, journalists and clergymen of the time considered its living conditions to be a national disgrace. But it wasn't alone. The dark tentacles of poverty swept further east and south to blight several other districts, perhaps less well known to you, but no less a dystopian nightmare for its inhabitants. Today, you will hear a description of St. George's in the East, a district between the River Thames and Whitechapel, its living conditions and its inhabitants, written in 1861 by an author who originally called his account London Horrors. And, for what you are about to discover, horrors would seem a fitting description for the squalid and cramped conditions found in this district, which so many people called home. With the construction of the London docks in 1801, there was a rapid influx of unskilled labour seeking work, and a mass of poor housing thrown up to accommodate them. The genuine report you are about to hear of life in St. George's in the East really does make you wonder how people survived a hard life and endless suffering. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us to continue bringing the past alive. Passing from Whitechapel towards the river into the commercial road, you find the thoroughfare one of the broadest in London, with stone tramways for wagon traffic laid down on each side as far as Blackwall. The main road, viewed at any hour, shows little evidence of the crowded population who huddled together behind the houses, especially on the riverside. The difference in the superficial appearance of this road compared with Whitechapel may be accounted for by the fact that it is pierced by very few courts and alleys, strictly so called, the small dwellings being invariably arranged in streets. There are thousands of these streets, spread over Stepney, Limehouse, Shadwell, St. George's, and Mile End, having such a family likeness that the description of one in its main features will serve for them all. Their houses look flat and depressed, being only 1 story high, and they generally contain 2 small rooms on the ground floor, 2 more above, with a very close little yard, seldom larger than one of the rooms. When they are new, clean, and in the possession of their original tenants, they shelter a hard-working class, chiefly connected with the shipping trade and the different factories in the East. And when they fall a few degrees in the scale of comfort and respectability, they follow the example of more wealthy neighbourhoods and admit a lower colony of tenants. From being occupied by struggling householders, they sink gradually through all the phases of lodging-letting until they are reduced to the condition of being divided into tenements. Each room is then taken by a different family. The doorstep is seldom cleaned. The passage and stairs belong to everybody and are looked after by nobody. The little yard becomes choked up with dust and filth. The inspector of nuisances is openly defied if he ever goes near the place, and the unfortunate street is doomed. It grows more black and more ragged every day. A yellow mist always seems to hang over it, through which its unsightly inhabitants may be dimly seen from the main thoroughfare into which it runs. Ignorant policemen begin to look suspiciously upon it, and overrated detectives put it down as a harbour for thieves. It gets an ill name, like an unlucky dog, and is hanged by all except the patient district visitors. It is unnecessary for anyone to go over all the low streets of a particular district to give the public a faint picture of their chief characteristics, and he will do his duty if he carefully selects that representative thoroughfare which seems to him to present most of the features he wishes to depict. Such a representative hole and corner I believe I have found in Star Street, in the Christchurch division of St. George's in the East, a locality of 43 acres with a population of 13,300, untiringly watched over by the Reverend G. H. McGill. Star Street is a narrow avenue, leading out of the commercial road towards the river, the entrance to which is half blocked up with fruit stalls, crossing sweepers, and loiterers. Unlike most of its neighbours, it hangs out every sign of overcrowding for the most careless or hurried passer-by to look at, and it contains, perhaps within an equal area, more hard-working, would-be honest stragglers for dear life than any similar street in the same district. Its road is black and muddy, half filled with small pools of inky water, in which stand a number of trucks and barrows belonging to the poorest class of costermongers. The end is nearly blocked up with a public house, which seems to thrive in the very citadel of want. At some of the low dirty doors, wet baskets are standing half full of a common fish called dabs. In some of the wretched parlour windows, under sickly yellow curtains, a few rotten oranges are displayed on an old shutter for sale. Another miserable front parlour seems to have been scooped out so as to form something like a shop, in which a few coals are thrown down in one corner as a sign of trade. Another parlour has been turned into a cat's meat store, and there is one of those small chandler's shops, where nearly everything is sold, and weekly payments are taken, which invariably flourish in such neighbourhoods. I went down this thoroughfare with the chief clergyman of the district, and we were immediately surrounded by poor, thin women in scanty dresses, representing every variety of dirt and poverty. They have nothing to pawn, nothing to take to the marine store dealers. Their husbands can get no work for the present at the docks, January 1861, and they can get little or no needlework from the cheap clothiers in the neighbourhood. Their standard of living is so low that a few days of compulsory idleness brings them to the brink of starvation. One has a story to tell of fever and sickness, another of bread refused by the poor law authorities on some technicality, another begs to be visited without delay, and a dozen others present letters of recommendation for relief from the funds at the disposal of the clergyman. The same question seems always to bring the same melancholy answer. How many children have you? 8, sir. What's your husband? A dock labourer. How long has he been out of work? Not done a stroke for 13 weeks. Come to me, at the parsonage, at 3. We go into some of the houses to inspect the misery. The ground floor of one is occupied by a sweep. A short broom sticks out over the door. The front parlour contains 2 women, half covered with soot. A bed, caked in soot like the women, stands in one corner, in which an infant is sleeping, with its little face looking pale, even under the dirt, and its head lying lower than its legs. 2 other young children are playing on the black floor in front of the little glowworm of a fire, eating what is literally bread and soot. 6 other children belonging to the same parents are playing somewhere about in the inky puddles, and even this family only represents half the population of the small house. The rooms may be 10 feet square, certainly not more. Average height 8 feet 5 inches, length 9 feet 6 inches, width 9 feet 6 inches, and the rent averages about 2 shillings a room. The back parlour is also rented by the sweep, and it contains nothing but a mountain of soot, the store resulting from several weeks' work, an empty bird cage, and a fluttering green rag of a window blind. Upstairs, in one room, is a street hawker with a wife and 5 children, and in another room is a carpenter, also with a wife and 5 children. The latter has the same old painful story to tell of no work and no pay. He is a strong, healthy man, nearly 50 years of age, respectable in appearance and civil in address. He is trying to still his evident hunger with a little weak tea, probably made from boiled tea leaves, which his wife had begged from some family for whom she works. A few small lumps of precious bread are floating in the tea, and a hungry child is looking over the edge of the table at the remains of a small, coarse loaf. Not a crumb is wasted of the scanty store, for the blank days of unproductive idleness may not be near their end, and the hateful workhouse must be kept at arm's length. The other children, if not in the ragged or national schools, are rolling anywhere about the streets, like all other children of the very poor, in every back alley of the town. When they are gathered together at night, if they ever are so gathered, the roof of this stunted dwelling will cover 25 inmates. Other houses in the same poor street, not larger, not cleaner, shelter 22 and 21 inmates respectively, and 13 lodgers for one house seems to be a very common number. 2 of the rooms have 11 inmates, while one particular room has 9, and another room has 9 also. The general result seems to be, according to a local census taken by the Reverend Mr. McGill on December the 19th, 1860, that in 235 small rooms there is, self-crammed, a growing, breeding population of 344 adults and 357 children, making a total of 701. A few of these unfortunates have been struck off the list since this melancholy account was taken, some by exhaustion or long-settled disease, brought to an end by want. One labourer gave in under a low fever a few hours before we visited the street, and his dead body was stretched upon the only bed in the dark room, covered with a borrowed white sheet. Round the fire was a crowd of weeping women, and amongst them the widow, with 2 of the dead man's moaning children stricken with the same fever. Wretched as these people were, they would struggle to bury the dead without assistance from the parish, for there is nothing the poor have such a horror of as a pauper's funeral. No sooner have we left this abode of misery than we are almost dragged over to another, where a mere girl is suddenly left a widow with 2 helpless infants. Her husband was a dock labourer, twice as old as herself, and he died of asthma. He hung about the docks in the keen weather, day after day, waiting for ships that never came, and the afternoon before he came home wet, miserable, and hungry, took to his scanty bed, and never left it again. Death is bitter enough at all times, and in all places, but it is 100-fold more bitter where those who are left are haunted by the dreadful feeling that a few pence would have kept the body and soul together, if they could only have been found. There are other streets in this district, such as Devonshire Street and Hungerford Street in the immediate neighbourhood, which are as full of hunger, dirt, and social degradation as Star Street, my representative thoroughfare. They have all been in the same condition for years, and they show little prospect of material improvement. They contain no thieves and no threepenny lodging houses, and are tolerably free from houses of ill fame. It is a curious social fact that when a particular street reaches a certain depth of poverty, it becomes purified from its vice, for though thieves and prostitutes do not become converted in a period of scarcity, they invariably shift their quarters.